Hello, my name is Dahlia Donalds, and welcome to Sacred Mindshift Circle. Today we have a very special guest. She's the founder of the educational platform Vibrant Freedom and the author of the book Source from Within, a practical framework for vibrant freedom, which provides practical tools and spiritual principles for deep, lasting inner transformation. Through decades of inner work and personal dedication, she has learned not just how to heal herself, but how to help others to do the same. Today, with over 25 years' experience, she leads transformational workshops and supports thousands of people to expand their consciousness and live from a place of deeper love, clarity, and freedom. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia Lamb.
Hi there.
How are you, Cynthia?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me, Dahlia.
So let's begin a little bit about your background. And because I've seen many of your videos and I watched them and I think they're very informative, especially for people who are like searching for answers to like daily situations that sometimes bother us or that we want to try to learn to work around. But before we get into how you acquired all of that, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you started out in this field.
Yeah, thank you. So, I grew up in a really stereotypical dysfunctional family. It was a middle class, two alcoholic parents, lots of abuse. We were Catholics, so we went to church every Sunday. And when I was a child, I didn't know the word hypocrisy, but I could feel it. And in my house, spirituality was really just on Sunday morning. So every Sunday, the whole family would go to church and we'd listen to the service, and there would be these readings, and it would all be about love thy neighbor, or thou shalt not, whatever. And then by Sunday evening, it felt like the whole family just fell apart, and my father would be drinking, my mother would be yelling, um, and I just I didn't get it. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel congruent to me. And something just felt off. I had always been very in love with nature, and most especially babies and animals, small animals. I just loved nature. And I had this kind of very naive, bright innocence that just time after time I kept getting crushed. Something would happen, and the way the adults around me would react, I felt very sad. And so I started to feel disillusioned. And over time, I felt like that bright light sort of dimmed. And by the time I was a teenager, I was very cynical. I didn't believe in God anymore. I thought that religion was just BS. And I didn't trust the adults around me. And then I had this really bad teenage breakup, real typical teenage thing where I had my first love and it was so sweet. And then the whole thing blew up. And I felt like I had blown my chance at love. I felt like I was unlovable, that I would never be loved, and that basically I had blown my life. And I went into a real down. I was very down, very dark, very negative, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had at my high school, they were always trying to push us into a career, and I never had any idea. I never had any inkling of what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to be a mom, but I couldn't say that because this was career, right? You had to pick a career and you had to go off to school. And so I tried acting for a while and loved that. But then when it came to the time to audition, I froze. The light went on the video camera, and I just saw that light. I completely froze, and I wasn't able to do that audition. So I bailed on that. And then I ended up just kind of scraping together a portfolio and going off to art school. So I went off to art school at 18, really very closed-hearted, very down, very, yeah, just like not engaged in life, really. I didn't have very many close friends at the time. And yeah, I had a very bleak outlook. So if anybody had said to me, asked me if I was spiritual when I was younger, I don't know that I would have really related to that. I think that I was aspiritual, right? Just denying God, denying love, and really feeling very negative about the world. And so that was kind of my initial uh, upbringing. And then all of that changed in one day. So
So, as you said, when you turned 18, this is when you really had some kind of spiritual awakening. How did it change from being completely apathetic to everything related to spirit and religion to now becoming someone who motivates others in this area? What happened when you turned 18?
yeah, I had just had a bad breakup and I was very much in a depression. I was in this bleak, kind of dark hole. And I literally poisoned myself and my appendix ruptured. And I got misdiagnosed twice. And so, probably about 2 days after my appendix ruptured, I ended up in the hospital with another misdiagnosis. It took like a whole week for them to figure out. And then they took me in for an exploratory surgery about 10 days later. And I was on this operating table, and I just remember these beautiful light beings. They were iridescent, they were like rainbow colored beings, very humanoid, but without, looking like us, right? Just rainbow iridescent light. This group of beings just kind of flew down, and I just reached out my hand. They just took me by the hand and I just went up out of my body. I remember looking back and seeing myself lying on that surgery table there. And we just shot out into the universe. We shot out into the center of the universe and landed on this kind of big platform that had like a surround screen that was translucent. So I could see the entire universe, just galaxies all around me, just surrounded. It was very, very beautiful. And I was out there for what felt like months. It felt like about 3 months. And during that time, I just received downloads of information, and information would come up on the screens very, very rapidly, very rapidly. We've seen this in some of the movies, which is very interesting to me because I think that some of the people that have written movies about people having this kind of experience, somebody must have had some kind of out of body near death experience. Anyway, so I was shown many things. I was shown why we're here on planet Earth, stuck in this karmic cycle and repeating these lifetimes of suffering, and how to get out of it. I was shown how to heal, how to really fully heal and come into congruence with the will of our soul. Shown that we have souls, right? And that these souls have been trapped in this spiritual warfare. And I was taught about the spiritual warfare, not in tremendous detail. It was interesting because there's a lot of things that are going around now where I'm like, oh, I want to know that. Is that true? And my guidance always says to me, need to know basis, need to know basis. So I was only given what I really needed to know. And I was shown this time on the planet. I was shown this time where we would move into this kind of rapid, accelerated time of warfare where this was why I was really here, right? That all of this stuff would be happening to steal our souls, really, and trap us into this fear-based paradigm. and that I was here to help people out of it. And I was shown that I would teach many, many thousands of people. I was shown that I would write books and teach all over the world. And I think more than any of that, I had the actual visceral experience of going in and out of oneness with this group of light beings. We were all kind of together in a circle, and we would just kind of do this group hug kind of thing where we would just hold hands and then just merge. And we were everything. And there was no we. It was like an I am. I was everyone and everything and really in the oneness. And then I would pop back out and it would be we again, right? And so I was really shown this group consciousness is real. And it was so incredibly loving. It was the most loving feeling I'd ever felt in my life. It felt like it's very hard to describe, but it was like warm honey had been poured down into my body, and it went all the way down to the tips of my light body's toes. I was in a light body. I was all rainbow too. And it was just a feeling of such warmth and such love. It was just like being wrapped in the most loving, loving embrace. And that feeling lasted just about as long as it took for the painkillers to wear off. I got plunked down into my body in the hospital after being unconscious for 30 hours and a 10-hour surgery. And I just remember coming back into my body. My mom was had her head at the foot of my bed and she was crying. And I woke up and she said, "Oh my God, you're awake." And she said, "I love you." And it was so funny because my mother had never said I love you before. And it was the first time I heard it. And I was in this bliss of love. And it was just like, of course you do. We are loving. And I had so much ease and peace. And she was afraid I was going to die because the doctors told her that, I had a 50% chance of making it at that point. And I just kept saying, "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." And then the pain came. It took about 2 days because I was under some pretty heavy painkillers. And when the pain came back, what happened was this adventure that I had had I stopped feeling it. I stopped feeling it in my body, and it just kind of went up, 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 up. And it became a mental level thing. It became a memory. And I could remember it, but I wasn't as connected. I was racked with pain and I was really, really suffering. And so it was an intense time. And I think that I tried to reject it. I tried to reject it. I tried to say, maybe it was just a dream. Maybe they picked the wrong hospital bed. That was one excuse I kept saying. They picked the wrong person. Like I couldn't possibly be this person who was going to write books and help people because I was such a mess. And I just went into this down again. I went into a down afterwards. And I really fought what I was being asked to do. And I would say I resisted for a good 10 to 15 years. And my life just started getting worse and worse and worse. But there were two problems with trying to resist. One was that all of this stuff that I had learned, all of those downloads about why we're here and how things work, they all made so much sense, right? It like made sense of the world that doesn't make very much sense when we don't come with a handbook like how does earth plane work, right? So all of the downloads made so much sense to me. And the second part was that I had opened a channel. So that was like having a an open phone line with my guides, which eventually up leveled to an open phone line with my soul. But in the beginning, it was my guides that I was connected with. And I would be going along in my human life, doing all the things I did. You know, I got married, a very dysfunctional relationship, and that was a lot of suffering. And my guides kept saying, you need to listen and or it will just get worse. And I kept thinking it couldn't get any worse, and then it would get worse and worse. And I got divorced, and then I got remarried, same man, different face, all the same issues. And so my life just started getting worse and worse and worse. And in the end, I ended up twice divorced, single mom with 3 children. And I was in so much suffering. I had created a toxic mold environment in the house I was renting. And I was so sick from the toxic mold, I felt like I was going to die. My guides kept saying, "You're not going to die, but you're just going to feel like you're going to die," right? And it just got worse and worse. I got so sick, I could barely work. I was struggling. I was waitressing at the time, and I could barely work enough hours to put food on the table for my kids. And then it just kept getting worse and worse. So I was just stuck and struggling and suffering with poverty, with sickness, with dysfunctional relationships. And then one day it got so bad that I finally just gave up. I surrendered it over. And I turned it over to the will of my soul, and I started listening. And that was just, if there's any one shift in my life, that was the thing. It was that surrender. It was just giving it over and saying, okay, my way, trying to will it, trying to struggle, trying to think it and rationalize and push and will my way through this is not working. And so I surrendered and I just asked to be guided. And it was like this. It was like spirit just came in and lifted me up, and I was guided exactly what to do to get out of that mire. I was in a custody battle over my youngest child, and I was told what to do and what to say. I was guided to get out of the moldy house. I heard, "Call Susan," and Susan was a friend, and I just called her up, and I didn't even know why I was calling her. And I was saying, "Yeah, we're in this moldy house." And she said, "Get out of there, come on over." And she just invited me and my 3 kids to stay, and we stayed with her. I'm so grateful to her. We stayed with her for 6 months while I got on my feet. And just issue by issue by issue, I was held. I was offered a lucrative job, and I stopped waitressing and started teaching at a charter school. I didn't even have a teacher's certification, but they figured out a way to put me in as the assistant teacher, and it was just amazing. And so I was held little by little by little, and I was still suffering. I was still an internal wreck, but my life on the outside got okay. And then one day, my guidance said, "Okay, now it's time to work on you." And I started receiving the downloads how to heal myself.
Wow, it's a very fascinating story. And I'm also a single mom, and I always talk about all the things that go happening to us. So I really identify also with that emotion and that story of, the sensation that you're trying to make things work, and you feel like all these obstacles just keep popping up. And so what I understand then from this experience is that after the outer body experience, or I don't know if you want to call it like a near-death experience almost, or would you say it's more outer body? It was
Well, it
just,
was a near death
it was,
experience because I basically died on an operating table. came back. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it wasn't a typical NDE. No,
Hmm.
it was an near death out of body awakening experience.
Okay. And then, it wasn't that everything changed from one day to another, but eventually when you did surrender, when you did just kind of like accept that, it wasn't working in your the way you wanted it to work out, that's when you really feel like your guides kind of took over to kind of help push you in the right direction, everything that you needed to do to move forward. My question also is, how did people around you react when they like, I don't know, did you tell them about this encounter? Did you tell your parents? Did you tell your friends like what you saw? What were their reactions? Was that part of why you kind of pushed it
Yeah.
away a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know you can relate to this because you understand the spiritual warfare. Well, what ended up happening was that I was in the hospital right when I started recovering. They have this thing where you're not allowed to leave the hospital until you do a bowel movement, right? And I hadn't had any food in 10 days, and they were giving me this liquid diet. And I didn't even want any of it because it was basically just all sugar. It was like 7 Up and Jello, and it was just so gross. So I was having a really hard time. So they had me walking, and I was walking up and down the hallway, and there was this one woman who was in a room. We were kind of like a little off the ICU, like a little special ICU unit. And there was a woman that just kept screaming. All she did was scream, just help, help, help all day. And so I started sitting with her. And the nurses just loved having me sit with her because it kept her calm. And she would just tell me stories about her life and everything. And so then this one day, I walked into her room and I heard her, but I was looking at her bed, and it was super interesting because her bed was empty. And it took a minute. It took a minute for me to figure out what was going on. But she was like, Cynthia, I need you to tell my son that I don't care about my china anymore. He can give away my china collection. She had a collection of all these little china figurines, like the little shepherdess and the little angels and all the little china. And she had been wanting her son to have this collection, and he wasn't interested at all. So she was really, and I looked up, and this man walked in the room, and he was probably in his 40s or 50s in this business suit. And he was all, looked very uptight. And I turned to him and I said, "Oh, your mom wants me to tell you to that she doesn't want you to keep this collection anymore. She's free and you can just give it away." And he turned white. He just went white as a ghost. And he turned and he screamed, "Nurse, there's a crazy woman in my room." And the nurse came in, and I looked down and I realized, oh, she's gone, right? She's talking to me, but the bed was empty and she wasn't in the room. So she was passing over, right? And I was still drugged out. So it took a minute, but the nurse turned and said to him, "Don't worry about it. It happens all the time." And she led me out of the room. And so a couple of other things happened, and I quickly saw that I would be judged as crazy, right? And because I opened a channel, I mean, my whole field just was busted wide open. So when I went outside in public, it was a cacophony. It was just, I was overwhelmed with the sounds, it was almost like I couldn't hear a single voice. I just heard millions of voices. I could hear people's thoughts. And that was a trip for them. So if someone was thinking something and I said something about that, they would become very scared. So I couldn't go to restaurants. I couldn't go to malls. I couldn't go to a concert. I basically had to hole up and be as far away from people for the first few years until I got a handle on it. And there was a moment where I put a wall up. where I just decided this is enough and I shut it down. I could still hear my own guides, but I couldn't hear the cacophony. And so I didn't know what to do about it, right? Because it was my energy field was just completely wide open. And then one day I actually had ran into my brother and I looked at him and he had light streaming out of his eyes. And I said, "Wow, what happened to you?" And he started laughing and he said, "You need to come meet my teacher." And he took me to his spiritual teacher. And she took one look at me and she was like, "Whoa, you're a conscious channel and you're blown out. Like, you need help," right? So she sent me to her teacher, whose name was Dr. Frank Alper. And he's considered like the father of vibrational healing. Back in the 70s and 80s, he did all this stuff around color therapy and light therapy and sound therapy. And he's the one who matched all of the vibration with the note and the color and the aromatherapy. And so almost all forms of vibrational healing came out of his initial work. And so I learned energy protection. And that was just gigantic. Like, I learned how to take sovereignty of my own field and how to really decide what entered my field and what didn't. And so rather than just being wide open, I was able to set conditions about what I was willing to have. One of the conditions that I set is I set the condition that only that which is of my vibration or higher may enter my field, and anything of lower vibration will simply be deflected or transmuted into loving. And so that allows my field, my heart, my center, my light to be wide open again without taking on the cacophony of, you know, fear energy and everyone's thoughts, feelings, emotions, irrational beliefs. That was huge. And I also upped my channel, so I was no longer talking to dead people, but really just connecting up with my own soul.
And again, you didn't have these experiences when you were younger. This all happened later in life, which I find like interesting because like in my situation, I had these experiences like throughout moments in my life, but it
Mm-hmm.
was only really maybe like this last year that I realized that the same thing like you, that I started hearing on a frequency, uh like people hearing my thoughts and me hearing their remarks and all of this. So it's
Right,
very interesting, and most people will not believe this, but
right.
um the first, like, you know, for me, I always had this situation when I started meditating. When I started meditating around like 2007, something like this, I would have like sleep paralysis and I would hear and I couldn't decipher it. But
Yeah,
after meditating, then I started hearing them speak to me in English, or at least that I understood what was being said. So some
right.
people really don't believe in this, but I, yeah, believe in it entirely. So my question now, before I go into the energy protection aspect to go into how you do your work to help others, I know you said that what you were told, the downloads that you receive were explaining to you like what's going on this earth. And you mentioned somewhat that there is this kind of agenda to
Hmm.
stop the souls from progressing in this kind of ascension process. So tell me a little bit more of what you remember you were given, like the information related to this battle between the light and the dark, and how how they were trying not to allow us to raise our frequency.
All right. So, yeah, I think that um, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there. But basically, what I was shown was that this was an eons long warfare, right? It isn't just this year, 2020. We're talking, this has been going on a long time. And that this particular point in Earth's evolution is very important. And that there's a lot of souls that have come that are on what I call team love. I call the fear-based paradigm team fear, and we're on team love. And there's a lot of people from team love that are here to help people awaken and help people heal and help people really learn how to navigate this time here on planet Earth, which for a lot of people can feel very dark, very daunting. So I was shown that Team Fear's gig is basically like a fear loosh machine, right? They generate fear and suck it in. So Team Fear feeds off of low vibrations. And the moment we raise our vibration higher than this kind of fear threshold, we are operating above the radar. And this is where our power is. Our power is in rising above the fear based paradigm and operating from alignment and congruence in alignment with the will of our soul. We are from that place, we become invincible, right? We come from a loving source, and our soul, the analogy I like to use is like the sun. If the sun is our source energy and we are a ray of divine light, every single one of us humans is a ray of divine love light, and we're connected to our source. We're one with it at the being level. Like that experience I had of going in and out of oneness and then separate. When we're separate, we're our ray, right? And so this ray that we have is energy. We're an energy being. And I think of like the pinpoint of light that hits the planet is in our body, right? And so this energy cannot be destroyed, it can only change forms. And so the trap that Team Fear is doing is trying to trap our energy. And if we can take dominion over our own energy, then we can play in this spiritual battle in a way where we can be undaunted and not scared and just doing our part to raise the vibration of the collective. And that's the way we'll get free. And what I was shown images, and there were timelines attached, and there were specific events that were going to happen or could potentially happen but might not happen. And it was like, if we rise before this, 50% of the planet will make it. If we rise before this, 40% will make it. If we rise, if this happens, now we're down to 30% or 20%. And so there were these momentous things that were going to happen. And it was kind of scary actually to see that, like that this could happen and then this could happen and then this could happen. And one of the things was the rollout of the bioweapon. So we're already into like the first phase of this big plan to depopulate planet Earth. And so I just have a lot of joy and excitement about more and more people awakening. And I don't feel scared about what's happening, because I feel like this is such an opportunity. It's like a crucible for souls to wake up and learn who they are and use it as an opportunity. It's fuel for us to self-realize.
So now I want to talk a little bit about, like you said, we are at a moment in time in history where a lot of people are beginning to have these, symptoms of awakening. They're realizing a lot of things are going on in the world. They're becoming more sensitive to a lot of things that they're experiencing. For me, myself, for example, I, as I mentioned before, I've always had experiences, but I would say last January, I actually felt, and this was during prayer, I was actually praying at like 3 in the morning. I felt the heat rising from underneath my bottom and going up. And I've had this experience maybe 3 times. And when I do any kind of prayer or meditation, I'm not really looking for the experience. You know what I mean? But it was something that happened. And I know a lot of people sometimes they're afraid, especially if they're from the Christian community, to talk about energy, to talk about Kundalini, to talk about chakras. But I really do feel that we are like electromagnetic beings, we are electrical beings, and this exists. Like you can't say like, you know, these things don't exist. And like I said, I wasn't looking for it. It just kind of happened, and I had the Bible open in my lap, you know.
Right.
And tell me a little bit about this and people's misconceptions about awakening and spirituality.
Well, for me, I also never sought any of the spiritual experiences that I had. And I think they happened really spontaneously when I stopped trying, right? And so I think that there's a misconception around Kundalini and what Kundalini is, that it is something scary. And all it is energy, really. And we, like you said, we are energy beings. And when we look at an image of like a human aura, there's a toroidal field, and there's a north pole and a south pole. We have a crown chakra and we have a base chakra, right? And there's the chakra system. You don't have to know a lot about that to understand that we are electromagnetic in nature. You know, everything that happens is energy. And so when we get plugged in to earth plane, we come down into this fear-based realm, and our energy centers get really blocked. They get blocked up with fear. And so we don't really operate the way with the flow from North Pole to South Pole, right? And it creates all kinds of problems for us. So for me, part of my awakening was really learning how to get into the flow. And for me, it started from the crown down, and I was unblocked first coming down. And then I had this kind of wall. I realized I had, like, just below the belly button, I had just a wall between my third chakra and my second chakra. And nothing moved down there, right? Like all the movement was happening up here. My heart center was open and my third eye was open. I was, connected and channeling and plugged in. But there, my lower centers were kind of stagnant and frozen. So one of the last areas that I looked at on my healing journey, I kind of went through area by area. Like first I worked on my finances and just getting my family to solvency, right? And then I worked on relationships, and then I worked on my health and my self-care and my communication skills, and just kind of area by area. And the last area I looked at was my sexuality. And I don't know why. I was just like not wanting to go there. I had been in 2 marriages that were basically sexless. And then I was in a 10-year relationship that was also sexless. And I had a lot of trauma around my sexuality. And I had a lot of Catholic guilt around it. And I had a lot of body shame. And yeah, just trauma from my birth experiences, most especially my first two. My third was pretty more natural. And so there was a lot in there that I needed to heal in my base chakra. And so I decided to do it. And I got guided to doing a work exchange with a Tantra teacher who became my friend. And he helped me out with my website. And in exchange, I helped him with his Tantra classes. And so I ended up having this series of yoni massages. And people might think, well, that's a really weird thing, right? To get a vaginal massage. But it's actually very much like just any other massage on your muscle. It's literally like going into the vagina and getting into the knots, like working out the actual trauma that gets stored in the fascia, right? And the first couple of yoni massages, I just sobbed my eyes out. I just cried and cried and cried. So much trauma, abuse trauma, bad sexual experience trauma, birth traumas. And then somewhere around like the fourth or fifth massage, I started feeling more ease in my body. And then by like the seventh or eighth, I started feeling this just incredible sensation and pleasure. And it was after a yoni massage. It was my ninth yoni massage. And normally the masseuse would stay in the room and have me like curl in a ball and then lay out and kind of do a final relaxation afterwards. But for some reason, he got up and he left the room. And then I just fell to the mat. I felt my body take like three deep breaths and I just let myself sink down into the mat. I was just completely alone in the room. And then all of a sudden, it was like this fire hose just busted through my base chakra. It came up through me and out and exploded into this purple light out my third eye center, my sixth chakra. And then I just laid there, just kind of undulating in full body orgasm for about 20 minutes until he came back in the room. And this was in the middle of a workshop. And so he brought like six people in because it was a demo. And they just sat there and watched me in full body orgasm. And it took me about an hour. I mean, I was laughing, they were laughing. It was really, it was just like I was just in full body bliss. And I went in and out of, I had to crawl out of the room. I had to go cook a big meal for the group. And so it took me a while to be able to even stand up from that. I had aftershocks where my body just orgasmed for several weeks. And what it ended up doing for me once it finally settled down was that I now had a clear channel. The Kundalini energy was actually earth energy. It was actually coming up, into the base of my toroidal field. So we have spiritual energy that's coming from above, and then we have this earth energy that is coming from below. And my feet landed on the ground and I was grounded for maybe the first time in my life. Because I think before that, after my near death awakening, it was like I was walking around about 8 feet above the ground. I was never really in my body. I was often, tripping or having accidents or forgetting things. And this Kundalini awakening brought me grounded and plugged me in fully to the earth, and I was plugged in from above. And so it created this stability in me that I had never experienced before. And so I'm more present, I'm more grounded, I'm sharper. It's just been interesting integrating it. It took a while to integrate it. And it's also been just amazing because now my whole, all of my chakras are operating and everything is flowing freely. So, what I would say to people is, don't chase it and also don't fear it when it starts to happen, when you feel the Kundalini start to bubble up. It's just earth energies trying to help clear those lower chakras and get you grounded and plugged in.
And after you had this experience, like before, I'd always heard of like yoni baths. I didn't know that they actually did the massages. But after you had this experience, and now that you run this educational workshop, you do a lot of energy healing. Tell me a little bit about that and how this experience also helped you to understand how to heal others.
Yeah, so thank you. What I learned, I think one of the reasons why I didn't get to have the kind of awakening experience, the near-death experience like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie, where they got to have this instant enlightenment. I think the reason that I came in and went into all of this resistance was that I needed to learn how to do this myself. So I was shown how to heal myself. And then I had these energetic experiences, right? So I started teaching people how to heal themselves. I was initially trained as an energy healer where I would like do something to them. I would go in and kind of clear their chakras. I could do this etherically. So I was working remotely with people all over the world. And then I found that people would come back a year later and they would have the same issue. And so I asked my guides, I was like, what's up with this? Why do people come back? Why doesn't it work? And my guides said that the belief system has to be aligned with the healing work. And if a person still has beliefs inside that are old paradigm, they're just going to recreate the same issues over again. So it was recommended by my guides that I add 3 counseling sessions to the etheric energy healing work. So I did that and I did these healings, the counseling sessions first before I did the energy healing. And usually 2 counseling sessions in, the person was fine and their issue would resolve. So what I saw was that I didn't have to do anything to them for them to heal. I could just facilitate the counseling and then they could heal themselves and their chakra would unblock, their disease would resolve, their trigger would resolve, and people started healing themselves. And I had just miraculous healing after miraculous healing I got to witness. And that supported me to begin offering this for people. And eventually I started a school maybe about 10 years ago. I created a path for healing facilitators so people can learn how to counsel other people to heal themselves.
And what would you say that you notice or that you continuously notice now related to how people view energy work? Because, like you said, they would come, they would return. Do you think that sometimes people are very dependent on like that savior complex?
Absolutely.
How do our thoughts you know, help us or block us from doing the inner work?
Yeah. Well, the spiritual law is as within, so without, right? Our inner reality is actually creating our outer reality. So, that to me is the most important spiritual law that we have. And if people don't understand that, they're going to be looking outside and something's wrong in their life that they don't like. And they're going to be trying to fix it out there, right? And so when we try to change out there or get someone from out there to try to fix us, it never lasts. And it can't last because it's against the law. We live in a symbiotic relationship as within, so without. So whatever we see in our outer world that isn't working, it means that there's something in here that isn't working. And I can't fix that for anybody. But what I can do is I can change it for myself, right? And then I've learned how to do it for myself. And so now I can help guide other people to learn how to do it for themselves. And I think that in this day and age, part of the trap is the victim mentality, right? And so many people are steeped. Team fear is just out there shouting, "You're a victim, you're a victim, you're a victim," right? You're oppressed. And so people feel that. They feel powerless, they feel like a victim, they feel like they can't. And so they're looking outside for somebody else to come in and save them. And I think that people do get addicted. I think people get addicted to spiritual teachers. I think people get addicted to healing facilitators, to types of energy work, going to Reiki sessions, or going to red light therapy, or like whatever the outer thing is. And it's not really going to change if we haven't changed within. So I'm a big fan of taking personal responsibility and taking dominion of your own life in order to create the life that you really want.
So now, just to culminate, what are ways to just begin in changing our inner world? Like what can we do? Or the audience out there, if they want to start from somewhere, they're in a situation right now, they're interested in doing the inner work. Like, what are some suggestions that you would give someone just to start off with?
Yeah. So the first suggestion is to begin to listen. Just begin to listen. You don't need to have a meditation practice to begin to do that. You can actually do it anytime, anywhere, just by becoming aware, just by setting an intention to observe your own thoughts. And what's going to happen is you're going to start to hear the fears, you're going to start to hear the doubts, you're going to start to hear the self judgments that arise in your consciousness. And that is the work. That is the work. It's being able to dive in and hear it and listen to it. And by listening, we can learn how to hear what is off course and what is on course. What is on course that comes from the will of your soul is always going to feel loving. It's always going to feel supportive, like you're held. It's going to feel expansive and heart opening. There's going to be a natural peace or a state of ease with it. And when it's off course, when it's coming from fear based ideas or thoughts, it's going to be tight, it's going to be constricting, it's going to feel bad, it's going to create suffering, it's going to feel limiting, it's going to cause like a off course emotion such as anger or upset or sadness or fear, right? And so it's a triggered state, whereas ease is a relaxed state, a stress free state. And so we learn how to differentiate. And then you can learn tools of what to do when you hear the stuff that comes up that is fear based, that takes you off course. And it's easy to learn how to heal your triggers. I think it's a lot easier than most people would think once you learn the tools. And I would say find somebody who's free, find somebody who you look up to, who you resonate with, who's done a little bit of inner work, and just learn the tools. I teach them. You don't need to learn them from me. There's a lot of people out there now that have these tools that are learning how to integrate and heal and own the shadow and integrate the shadow parts and come into true alignment and integration, come into congruence with the will of your soul. And it's out there, it's available, and it's doable.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining me today. I really hope that these kind of conversations and, this kind of information really does give an uptick to the percentage of souls out there that actually do pass and help us lift that timeline into a better, higher frequency. I thank you so much for the work that you do because I think it is valuable. And I will be leaving all of your information about your school in the description of the podcast. And please be sure to subscribe to sacredmindshift.com so you never miss another important event or podcast. And thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining me today.
Thank you, Dahlia.